Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too. All right, welcome in to our final part of our 5-part series on how to take back control of your health. And so in step 1, we talked about assessment and goal setting. In part 2, we talked about creating a personalized fitness plan. In part 3, we talked about implementing a healthy diet. In part 4, we talked about establishing a routine. And today we're going to be talking about monitoring progress and adjusting as needed. And so once you have all the other parts in place, it's really important that you regularly check in on your progress, right? And so we don't want to just set goals for no reason and then never measure them, right? Now that's what happens pretty often, right? When it comes to like New Year's resolutions, we set these goals, but we never check, are we making progress? And so, if you're not seeing the results you want, don't be afraid to adjust your plan, right? Be flexible, adjust your plan based on what's working and what needs tweaking, right? Getting in shape is something that, it's going to take a while, right? Improving your health is something that, it's a process, right? But it's about making sustainable changes that you can maintain long term, right? And so if you're following something that isn't, suiting your situation right now, it's important to, adjust as needed. And so maybe when you started off, you had big hopes for yourself, right? And so that's why it's so important. In step 1, we're talking about assessing your current fitness level, right? Because if you're not honest with yourself, if you have this image of yourself of who you used to be, 15, 20 years ago, and that's who you think you are now, you're going to get real burned out very quickly. If you start trying to do those same workouts, you start trying to follow the same plan, because you're not the same person, right? You're 5, 10, 15, 20 years older, and you add kids into the mix there. It's a lot. It's a lot. So you have to find a plan that works for you, that works with your schedule, not just your schedule, but your wife's schedule, your kid's schedule, all these things factor in, right? And so if something isn't working, it's time to adjust, right? And one of the things, sometimes what happens is somebody will follow a plan, for a few weeks, and they think, they're not seeing results, and they decide they just want to, they found, the shiny object syndrome. They see something new online. They want to try that. And so the old plan wasn't working. So let me try this. Unfortunately, what happens many of the times is, again, if you're honest with yourself, you'll probably see that, maybe you didn't put as much work in as you needed to, right? Maybe you weren't as consistent, back to step 4, right? Maybe you weren't as consistent as you needed to be to see results, right? Maybe your nutrition was what we talked about in step 3, was closer to 50-50 rather than that 80-20 mark. Maybe your fitness plan was based on goals that you had 20 years ago, right? And so there's lots of different factors here. Now, if you're following everything to a T, you're working out, you're checking your nutrition, you're tracking your food, you have an honest picture of what's going on, you're staying consistent, and you're still not seeing great results, then sure, it's time to get back to the drawing board. But 9 times out of 10, we can go back up the chain there, go back to step 1, go right down the list there and see what's not working. So finding the broken link there, seeing where that gap is. How can we fill that? How can we make that a little easier for you? And so that's why it's so important to monitor your progress and adjust as needed. And so if you're not getting the results that you want, then something has to change. Either the plan has to change, the consistency has to change, something has to change, right? Because, you deserve great results, right? You deserve to be happy, right? But you have to put in the work, right? And more importantly, your kids, deserve a dad who is in great shape, right? Your kids are only young for so long, and you don't want to miss out on that because you're not willing to put in the work, and that might not mean an hour every single day of exercise. That's okay. That may be 15 to 20 minutes, but if you put 15 to 20 minutes of exercise into your calendar 2 to 3 times a week, and you did that consistently, where would you be in a year from now? How much more energy would you have, right? How much, how much more things could you do outside with your kids? You could run around with them, not have to worry about being winded. You're going to feel better. You're going to feel better because you're going to look better, and you're going to look better. It's going to increase your confidence, right? It's going to affect everything. It's going to affect how you show up to work. It's going to affect how, what you see yourself. You're the first person to see yourself every single day. You see yourself in the mirror. If you don't like what you see, that can put in pretty negative connotation on the rest of the day, right? It's going to change how your spouse looks at you. So getting in shape, it improves everybody in your life, right? And so it's so important to check on your progress. It's so important to monitor and adjust when necessary. Now, you have the 5 steps that you need to get back in shape, to take back control of your health. You've now learned how to take a proper assessment and set some goals that are actually realistic for your current fitness level. You've learned that, creating a personalized fitness plan is super important, right? You have to have something that is custom to you. You've learned that implementing a healthy diet is, probably the most crucial part of, improving your health. Establishing a routine. If you can't stay consistent, then, the best plan in the world doesn't matter. And then when you have all those in place, you're monitoring your progress and adjusting as needed. And it sounds so simple on paper, right? It sounds so simple, but sometimes it's not, right? You have so much going on. You have, your own job. Your wife may have a job. Maybe she's staying home with the kids, which is great, but that's still a job, right? That's still stressful. There's still so much going on in your life, right? Your kids have activities, and that's just the things down on paper, right? That doesn't account for maybe you're helping a loved one. Maybe they're later on in their life, and you're helping take care of them. There is so much going on, and that doesn't even count all the times, you just want to, sometimes relax, right? And so implementing this can be very difficult. And that's why I created my signature program, the Fatherhood Fit Method. I am super passionate about working with dads, right? I've got three kids of my own. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I absolutely love, being a dad. And it's hard. It's hard, finding time to take care of myself, and then have enough energy left over to take care of everybody else. But I know it's so much harder when I don't, right? When I don't go to bed when I'm supposed to, when I don't get up, when I set my alarm, when I skip my workouts, when I decide to, not be as dialed in on my nutrition, everything is harder. But, when I'm getting good rest, when I'm working out regularly, when I'm taking care of my body, when I'm controlling what I'm putting in my body, I feel so much better. And that's why I'm so passionate about just working with dads, and that's who I love to help. That's who I love to serve, because I believe being a dad is the most important job in the world, and I think every kid deserves the best version of their dad. Right? Our kids are only young for so long, and I think it's our responsibility to show up as best as we can for them. And if this is something you're struggling with, and this is something that you potentially may need some help with, then my email is in the show notes. Send me an email with the title coaching, and we'll have a conversation and see if what I offer could potentially help your situation. And if not, that's okay. I know tons of other coaches. I have tons of resources. I can always point you towards somebody. But I don't want to see you struggle. Your kids deserve better. You deserve better. Your spouse deserves better. Everybody in your life is better when you take care of yourself. And so, work on implementing these 5 steps, because if you can get these 5 in place, You're going to change your life, and you're going to improve everybody else's life as well, because it starts with you. You are the leader of your household. You're the leader of your spouse, right? You're the leader of your kids, and they learn from you. And so it's so important. It's so important that you're able to take care of yourself. And so work on assessing your current fitness level. Step one. Step two, you're working on creating a fitness plan that fits your goals, and your needs. You're implementing a healthy diet. You're consistent with it. You're establishing a routine, and then you're tracking and monitoring progress. And if this is something you need help with, go ahead and send me an email. I'd love to see if I can. That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.